In 1984, Marvel Comics published Secret Wars, its first company-wide crossover, complete with action figure tie-in. During the saga, Spider-Man gained a mysterious new alien costume that would eventually join with Eddie Brock to become the villain Venom. To celebrate my 500th video, I'm pitting the Red Hulk Wave, Sandman Wave, Retro Card Wave, and Animated Series Carnage Two-Pack against the new Secret Wars Tribute Wave to see which Marvel Legends black-suited Spider-Man is best. I'm also giving away a Secret Wars Spidey to one lucky subscriber, and if all of that wasn't enough, there's even gonna be a special guest cameo. So make like Spidey and stick around, this is gonna be a big one. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation and my 500th video. Before we begin, a few parameters. There have been a lot of black costume Spider-Man figures over the years, but for the purpose of this video, I'm only focusing on Marvel Legends. That said, I'm not going to be including the 360 Unleashed version. That one's a completely different scale. And I'm also not going to be including the Ultimate version from the 5-pack. It's a fine figure, but not quite what comes to mind when we hear black costume Spider-Man. Finally, I'm also not going to be including the Kraven the Hunter 2-pack. There are some minor differences, but overall it's close enough to the Sandman Wave version that it does feel redundant. With all of that out of the way, let's dig in. Starting off with the packaging, and first at the plate is 2007. This one was a blister card and exclusive to Target. What I like about this one is all the black costume Spider-Man artwork. The package is covered with all sorts of panels from the comics. Not only that, but he has a much more thorough bio than what we see these days, along with all sorts of character stats. Again, the Build-A-Figure was Red Hulk, and with other characters like Spiral, Wolverine, Adam Warlock, and Savage Silver Surfer, was a pretty strong wave. Unfortunately, we wouldn't get another black costume Spider-Man in Marvel Legends till 2016. Some original art on the side, a nice big product shot, and a far more concise bio. The Build-A-Figure for that wave was Sandman, and with other characters like Green Goblin, Spider-Man UK, and the Jackal was also pretty solid. And look who it is! Shocker! I already looked at the Animated Series retro card in my Versus against Mafex, so since the figure's been open since then, I'm just gonna kind of reuse that footage. Funny how that wave also had Shocker. Hasbro returned to the animated well in 2023 with this Carnage 2-pack, but this one's designed to look like the slipcase for a pair of VHS tapes, right down to VHS-inspired Marvel Legends logos. Lastly, and here we have Secret Wars. This line recreates the classic Mattel artwork from 1984, and so far, I've been pretty happy with the wave. My first impulse is always to go with a collector-friendly window box, but this cross-section of black costume Spider-Men has a lot of creativity and lots of nostalgia. That said, only one of them truly feels like a celebration of the character, so for packaging, this round goes to the Red Hulk Wave. Moving on to presentation, and the figures range in height from 5 3/4 inches, or 15 centimeters, to 6 1/4 inches, or 16 centimeters. Starting with proportions, and I'm not sure if Red Hulk Wave has reuse, but I'm kind of inclined to think that he does. The most telling sign for me is that the abdomen is narrower than the groin. It's kind of like they took the top half of one figure and put it on the bottom half of another. I'll also say that his head just seems too small for his body. Turning him sideways, you can really see what I mean. I also think it's telling that his hands are just more of a basic gesture instead of being Spider-Man specific. And then one interesting thing about this body is just how angular it is. All the lines of the muscles are just really sharp and pointy. The Sandman Wave version was based off the Pizza Spidey body, which at the time seemed like it was gonna be the definitive Spider-Man. Though I guess there's always a new definitive Spider-Man. This figure was sleeker and lankier, and combined with the large eyes, brought Todd McFarlane's artwork to mind. A lot of things about this body do still hold up, the wider hips and stance, however, not being among them, nor its infamously flat feet. The RetroCard Symbiote Spidey is just a repaint of the regular RetroCard Spidey, which itself borrows a lot of parts and tooling from Sunfire. In fact, the arms, legs, and butterfly joints are the exact same, and that updated torso still maintains some detail flourishes, but was retooled to update the articulation. Out of the ones we've looked at so far, it cuts the best silhouette, has lots of muscular detail, and eyes that aren't too small or too big. As for animated, and at a glance you might think it's the same as RetroCard, but that's not entirely the case. This one's a repaint of Renew Your Vows Spider-Man, which was mostly the same as RetroCard, but now boasts pinless elbows and knees, and toe-ticulation. common. Beyond that, the only difference is the cel-shaded paint job, but I'll get to that in a moment. For now, we're still talking about the proportions. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far, do me a favor and give it a like. This brings us to our fifth and final black costume Spider-Man, the one from Secret Wars. This one's based on the body from Amazing Fantasy 15. The only difference this time is that they filled in the holes for the web wings. Similar to Retro Card and Animated Series, he has a diaphragm joint and a reverse ab crunch, and similar to Animated, is pinless. That said, the details are much softer on this one. Unlike Retro and Animated, whose musculatures are very defined, the Amazing Fantasy body feels more like someone in a costume. He's also the shortest of the group. One minor detail I like is the furrowing around the brow, selling the idea that this suit is alive. Next, and let's talk about the logo. First, and let me say just how astonished I am by how inconsistent they are. Red Hulk is probably the messiest of the group. Even at a glance you can see just how fuzzy the white is. The black line work might be crisp, but doesn't really match up, though I do like how it lines up on his back. But notice just how different the white is from the upper torso to the bottom torso. Once you see it, you really can't unsee it. Sandman has a similar problem and actually might be my least favorite of the group. Looking up close, you can see that the white of the spider body is a different white than the legs, and then the white on the butterfly joint is a different white still. Not only that, but instead of trying to continue the design inside, they just gave him these big white boxes. Flipping around back, it's messy and incomplete. On Retro Card, the whites are pretty much the same, but it has its own unique issue. For the top half of the abdomen, they use this more three-dimensional paint to try to give it a sense of depth. Looking here, you can see where that lines up. But they didn't include it on the lower abdomen, so the upper torso and lower torso actually have two different textures. I will give them points, though, for keeping the logo inside of the butterfly joints. Obviously, they couldn't do that exactly for the back, but it does look pretty good, albeit the white on the butterflies seem a little bit different. Secret Wars has that two-toned issue, by which I mean the top half is a warmer white, whereas the bottom half is a cooler white. It also seems ever so slightly fuzzy, but I don't know if that's just mine or if that's emblematic of this line of figures. Once again, though, they did keep the logo inside of the butterfly, which I appreciate, and once again, the back is okay, though mine is a little bit messy. Out of all of them, the best painted logo has to go to Animated Series. Thanks to the cel shading, the colors match up much better than the others. Even the back seems to be the cleanest of the five. The cel shading is, of course, the biggest departure from all the other figures, by which I mean these painted on blue highlights to try to match the shading of the cartoon. In general, I am not a fan, mainly because cel shading just doesn't make sense for a three-dimensional object. Clearly the figure has its own highlights and shadows. Still, if you're a fan of cel shading, I do think Hasbro did a good job. On that note, I would like to point out the subtle dark blue airbrushing on Red Hulk. Even if it doesn't always line up right, still it's a detail that we definitely wouldn't get these days. Lastly, and on the subject of inconsistent detail, I want to talk about his hands. When I think of black costume Spider-Man's hands, I think of a white trapezoid and a black dot. Out of all five, only the Sandman Wave version has that. Red Hulk has the dot, but his patch is more of a square. Retro and Animated are rectangles, and Secret Wars is a triangle. The thing is, there's source material to support that. All of that. Any one of these designs is accurate depending on which comic book you look at. So as far as that's concerned, it really does boil down to personal preference. I doubt that Red Hulk would be anybody's go-to, and while Sandman might have some issues, it does a decent job of capturing a certain art style of the character. I prefer the proportions and overall look of the Retro Card, and while the pinless joints do improve Animated, the cel shading takes me out of it. For me, and for presentation, this round goes to Secret Wars. Before we move on to Poseability, I think it's time for that special guest cameo.
Hello.
Thanks, Dad. You can go.
Okay, but we still have to have a talk about that Power Girl video, young man.
Yeah, I probably have that one coming. On to Poseability. From the top, Red Hulk, Sandman, and Secret Wars heads are on ball joints and disc hinges, whereas Retro Card and Animated Series heads are on dumbbell joints. The downside of the disc hinge is it doesn't look as good, but it's way more functional, with Sandman and Secret Wars having the best up, that despite Retro and Animated having an extra notch cut in the back of the neck. They also get the best down. The trade-off is the ball joint and disc hinge doesn't really give you a lot of tilt, whereas a dumbbell is much better for that. In that regard, it really does come down to what's more important to you. For me, though, when it comes to Spider-Man, I don't really think that this small amount of tilt can compete with this level of looking up. Moving on down, the lowest arm raise goes to Sandman at about 90 degrees. The Retro Card, Animated, and Secret Wars come in next and are about even Steven, with the highest far and away going to Red Hulk. All five figures have butterfly joints. I'm I'm sad to report that Secret Wars actually has the lowest range, followed by Sandman, then Animated and Retro card, with the best range once again going to Red Hulk. All 5 figures have bicep swivel, which function the same. All 5 also have double jointed elbows, with the worst bend going to Red Hulk and the best bend going to Secret Wars. Again, Animated and Secret Wars being the only ones that are pinless, and while Red Hulk is the only one of the 5 with forearm swivel, all 5 figures have swivel hinge wrists. This includes Red Hulk, making this forearm joint redundant. Moving to the middle, in Retro card, Animated Series and Secret Wars have a diaphragm joint and a reverse ab crunch, while Red Hulk and Sandman have ab crunches and waist swivels. Worth pointing out that those ab crunches weren't quite as discreet back then. In terms of arching back, none of them can compete with Retro card and Animated Series, though they're all pretty impressive at hunching forward. And yes, I did have to tape Red Hulk down to a figure stand. All that said though, and while Red Hulk and Sandman can merely swivel side to side, Retro card, Animated Series, and Secret Wars can swivel and tilt, with Retro and Animated having a slightly deeper tilt than Secret Wars. Below the waist though, and most all of them have ball jointed hips, with Red Hulk having swivel hinge hip balls, which function like a shoulder and bicep. From a functional standpoint it works well because you get a really good range no matter which direction you point it, that on top of the thigh swivel. Aesthetically though, it's pretty outdated. That said, Sandman's kind of juts out a bit, with Retro, Animated, and Secret Wars cutting the best silhouette. Additionally, Retro card and Animated have drop hinge hips like a Mafex, but even then Sandman has the highest kick, followed by Retro and Animated, and then Red Hulk and Secret Wars at 90 degrees. The ugly engineering does, however, give Red Hulk the widest stance, followed by Retro and Animated, then Secret Wars, and lastly Sandman. Now I've already talked about the swivel on Red Hulk, but everyone else has thigh cut as well as double jointed knees, with the worst bend going to Red Hulk, followed by Retro, Animated, and Secret Wars, with the deepest bend actually going to Sandman. On the subject of Sandman, he's the only one that does not have boot cut, and while everyone's ankles can hinge, Red Hulk is the only one that does not have pivot. What's funny is that he actually has swivel, which makes me question why he needed a boot cut. Pretty much the same deal as the forearm swivel. Lastly, an Animated is the only one of the group to have toe articulation. With the exception of ankle pivot, the articulation on Red Hulk is fairly good for the time, but I'm amazed at just how good the range on Sandman is, especially the elbow and knee bends. Secret Wars is decent all around, but aside from the better neck, doesn't have as good a range as Retro card, which itself is narrowly edged out by Animated's toe articulation. For Poseability, this round goes to Animated. Moving on to Playability, and we're going to be looking at a lot of hands, just not from this guy. In fact, the Red Hulk Wave doesn't come with any character-specific accessories. Instead, all he comes with is the left arm of the Red Hulk. Maybe I should finish this guy and do a versus with him. This looks more like Harrison Ford than the new figure does. Speaking of build-a-figure pieces, and the Sandman Wave comes with a couple of pieces of Sandman. Not only is there a lot of texture, there's also a lot of nice painted detail, which in general I feel is kind of absent from most Marvel Legends these days. Beyond that, everyone has a pair of fists, everyone has a pair of wall crawlers, and in the case of Sandman, that's it. Fists and wall crawlers are the only hands that he comes with, and this is the one instance I'm okay with that. The symbiote suit actually generated its own webbing, which came out of the tops of his hands from that black dot. Because of that, not having thwip hands isn't the end of the world for this version of Spidey. That said, there was a period when he didn't have the symbiote but was still wearing a cloth version, so having the web shooters for that would be good. If you want to track down the Kraven the Hunter 2-pack, that has an extra Peter Parker head. The good news is that the remaining 3 figures do have thwippies. Not only that, but Secret Wars has a whole extra head. This one has narrow eyes. I really like the furrowed brow. To capture the magic of the original Mattel line, he also has a lenticular shield. It goes from Spider-Man to Peter Parker with some crazy bug-eyed tan lines. If you don't like that though, you can swap it out with this. Of course, I'd be remiss if I neglected to remind you that the animated series is in a 2-pack with Carnage, but Carnage is a conversation for another day. Playability is more than just accessories, however. It's also about how well your figures play with others. For the only other Hasbro Spider-Man from that era that I have, and here's Ben Reilly and the Iron Spider. Amazing to think that back then we got things like sculpted in webs. Otherwise, though, we have come a pretty long way since then, and since then we've gotten superior versions of both. Funny though how well the new Secret Wars figure scales with them. Next up chronologically is the Pizza Spidey body. These proportions work really well for the Todd McFarlane era. For Symbiote Spidey, I do prefer the bulkier proportions. Still, there's a lot to love with this old body, and again, I'm very curious to see what other variations they may give us using this new body. With that new Maximum Spider-Man coming out, though, I can't even help but wonder if Renew Your Vows here is going to be outmoded. Obviously, action figure engineering is always evolving. That said, as a base body for all things Spidey, I've been pretty happy with this one, but of course, new molds means new ways to sell us the same thing over and over again, and I'm sure we'll see maximum versions of all the rest of the Spider-Man variations soon enough. For now, though, and here are the other figures I have using the Amazing Fantasy 15 body. With Maximum Spider-Man coming out this year, I'm surprised that they didn't do the regular red and blue in Series 1 of Secret Wars. That way they could have gotten us to buy one more using this body. For one more Spider-Man body comparison, and here's the Animated Series Vulture 2-pack version. This one was built off the Sunfire body. Speaking of symbiotes, and here's Spider-Man and Carnage from the 2-pack along with the Animated Series version of Venom. As long as we're feeling animated though, and here's Symbiote Spidey with some other Spider-Man animated villains. For some Spider-Man love interests though, and here's Black Cat and Mary Jane Watson. I included Felicia here because she's the one who sewed the cloth version of the black suit, and you know what, in those matching black and white costumes they look pretty good together. Though this one's a match for the Animated Series MJ, Secret Wars is a bit smaller, but after Tom Holland and Zendaya, I'm used to Spider-Man being MJ's short king. Of course, we've got to bring out some iconic comic-style villains. Green Goblin and Doc Ock just feel like the most iconic. Not bringing out the Animated Series this time, but here's Retro Card. For Secret Wars, Hobgoblin would be more appropriate, but I don't have a Marvel Legends Hobgoblin. That said, it does seem only appropriate to bring out Venom. This is pretty much every size you could want. Since I did spotlight the animated version, I'm going to skip that this time, but hey, thanks to Secret Wars, we got this iconic villain. Of course, I know you'd never forgive me if I didn't compare them to the Mafex version. I already broke this guy down in a versus with the Retro Card, but for the most important comparison, here they are with Shocker! And as always, here they are with Stealth Iron Man. I'm sorry, what was that about Shocker being the most important comparison? Shocker? The only shocker is that you made it to 500 videos.
500 videos and not one grandchild.
Well, when I have children, maybe they can visit you in the home. Of course, one thing I'm sure a lot of you would like to see are some head swaps. Alas, the Red Hulk Wave's head was not designed for popping on and off, so we will not be including it. On that note, there aren't really a whole lot of options for the animated version. Still, I did at least want to show you what it looked like with the animated Peter Parker head. This is the head that came in the 2-pack with Vulture. If you're not a fan of the cell shading, though, you could always put it on Retro Card, and since there isn't any cell shading on the Peter head, I do think this works better. If you have the Walmart exclusive animated Spider-Man, that was built off Amazing Fantasy 15, so if you wanted your black costume Spider-Man to match that, well, here you go. For the other standard Peter Parker head, leastways until this bug-eyed one ships. Here's how that looks on Retro Card. All I'm saying is it looks like he had one too many web lines, if you know what I mean. Okay. This head came with the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man, so of course it scales really well here. The good news is that it first came out in the Mary Jane 2-pack, so it also works just fine on the old Pizza Spidey body. It is, however, a bit too big for Secret Wars. It looks like he's wearing a Peter Parker mask over his Spider-Man mask. I did try the Ultimate Spider-Man Peter head, but the peg hole is too small. Speaking of Secret Wars, if you wanted to use that head on other bodies, it is a bit small. And you know what? In the case of Sandman here, I think that really balances it out. If you're interested, and I know you are, here that is with the alternate head. This really kicks that old figure up a notch. Even on the Retro Card, I kinda dig the Secret Wars head, though only you can decide if it's too small for you. Again though, I really like how the narrow eyes look. It's reminding me of a specific comic, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Conversely, I do think that the other heads might be a bit big on the Secret Wars body. This is the Retro Card version, and this is Sandman. These are the biggest eyes of the bunch and are pretty striking. In general, I prefer Black Costume Spider-Man's eyes a bit smaller, but this is still pretty cool. Here's that head on the Retro Card body, and I really like this. With the proportions being larger, it just kind of balances out to me. You could always put that on the animated body too. Lastly, and here's the Retro Card head on the Sandman body. I do like it, but I think I like this body with the Secret Wars head just a bit more. Alas, Red Hulk doesn't have a whole lot of play value compared to where we are today, and while Sandman at least has a couple of hand options and bath pieces, is really best for only one specific black costume look. Same with Animated, despite having more hands and an extra figure. As a good all-around black costume Spidey, I like Retro Card, but with all the hands and extra head swap potential with other figures, and general good scaling, losing. For playability, this round goes to Secret Wars. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. I seem to remember Red Hulk going for about $10 when he came out, but these days goes anywhere between $40 and $50. Sandman was about $15 at retail and now goes up to $85 new in box, but you can get him loose for as low as $20. Retro Card will set you back between $35 and $45, but watch out for bootlegs. And Animated, of course, is a 2-pack and averages between $60 and $80. Secret Wars is new and retails for $24.99, but in celebration of my 500th video, I'm giving one away. For a chance to win, all you need is 1, to be a subscriber, and 2, to comment and let me know that you want it. This giveaway is not sponsored by Hasbro or Marvel or anyone else. It's just my way of giving back to the best action figure audience on YouTube. The best part is that this giveaway is open to everyone worldwide. Deadline to enter is Friday, March 7th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There is no purchase necessary, and please, only 1 entry per person. Duplicate comments will get you disqualified. The winner will be announced in my 2024 Marvel Legends Spider-Man Ranked video, which I'll be posting on Sunday, March 9th. If you don't mind loose, Sandman is your cheapest option, but given the greater amount of value in the box and the fact that you can still get him for retail, for price, this round goes to Secret Wars. Who wins the battle? 3 to 1 to 1 to 00. And there you have it, the best Marvel Legends black costume Spidey ever. Oh, what's that? My phone's going off. Oh, an alert from Hasbro. Hey, they've revealed some new Marvel Legends. I wonder what that's about. For more Spider-Man videos, including my original black costume versus, check out one of these. And until next time, play nice and have fun.